This, ladies and gentlemen, is football.
Hello and welcome back to Total A-Leagues. I'm Vince Rugari. Tommy Orr is back.
I am. Back
How you doing, man?
Feeling refreshed after my holiday.
You want to after 3 weeks on the Gold Coast, mate. Bloody hell. Good to have you back, man. You have keep an eye on the A-League during your time away?
Of course, couldn't keep my eyes off it. So much to talk about.
There's actually plenty doing, mate. You know, the home stretch of the season now, a couple of coaches in the hot seat as well, which we'll get into as well. Adelaide United, Sydney FC, huge game this weekend with big top six implications. And a big guest to kick us off as well, Tommy. Great to introduce our guest for this week, the Golden Boot leader at the moment, Western United star and striker Noah Botic. Noah, thanks for joining us.
No worries, thanks for having me, guys.
Must be feeling good about your football at the moment, Noah. Got the run into the end of the season coming up. So exciting, these last few games as well. But you're on top of the goal scorers charts, mate. Do you feel like you can stay there for the rest of the season?
That's the plan, hopefully. At the moment, I'm feeling confident in how I'm playing and what I'm doing on the field. And then also feeling confident in us as a team and what we're able to do on the field. You know, we've been in a good run of form, so hopefully we can keep this up going against Glory.
No, I want to ask you, obviously working with John Aloisi, obviously we've seen you score many different types of goals this season. You've been fantastic to watch, but in terms of John Aloisi and his influence on you, what do you have to say about it? How much has he kind of influenced you and how much has he worked with you in terms of one-on-one, making runs in the box and where to position yourself? Has that been something that you've been working on with him at the training ground?
Yeah, of course. I came with him since the very beginning when he first arrived as well. That was the main reason why I wanted to come to Western, was to learn off him, and the amount of experience he's had is, he can pass that on to me. We always have shooting sessions as much as possible, at least once or twice a week throughout the season. But it's been good to learn off him every kind of little detail, minor detail. He'll tell you something, we think, oh, okay, that's something that they must do overseas, because it's a lot different to how we do it here. Even when I was in Germany, the amount of kind of shooting sessions and different kind of little techniques and stuff that you learn and practice and stuff, it's good to bring back here and to keep practicing on it and just kind of make you a better player in those little areas around the box or outside the box as well. But he's been a massive influence.
Noah, team-wise, you guys are still a chance of obviously catching Auckland FC on top of the ladder. What gives you confidence that can happen? Obviously knowing as well that you've got them in the last day of the season at home.
Not really anything. It's just about us as a team and what we have to achieve. We take every game or we go play every game week by week, day by day. The boss tells us not to focus on the table, because obviously that's what people are thinking and are expecting of us. So we just kind of block that out and we let everyone outside of football say what they want to say, but we stick to what we have to do, and that's play our style of football, and it'll translate to the field and turn that into wins, hopefully.
No, I've got to ask you on a personal level, obviously the recent international window, we all thought you were a little bit unlucky maybe to miss out on that squad, but I think it's safe to say if you continue on your run of form that you're on, then you'll be every chance come June. Is that something that you think about or crosses your mind, or a goal of yours to get into the Socceroos?
Not massively. Obviously it's I'd be honoured to play for Australia. It's something I've been dreaming of since I was 10 years old, since I was a little kid. I'm sure anyone would be if they were in my situation. But all I'm focusing on is playing club football and helping us get to the finals and to win every game possible, really. So again, my goal and what gives me confidence is going into the next game and make sure we prepare for the next game, which is against Perth, and obviously after that then it'll be against Wanderers and then Brisbane and so on until the rest of the season. So it's something that's last in the back of my mind, but obviously it's something that I'm obviously looking forward to, and hopefully it'll come one day.
Noah, you've had a fantastic array of goal celebrations as well throughout the season. I've quite enjoyed some of them. But the latest one, the phone celebration after not being picked in the Socceroo squad, was that a sign of how much you'd like to be there?
Of course, any person, in the moment you feel a bit of frustration, but it's at the end of the day, it's Popper's decision, and I respect his decision about who he plays and who he picks. And obviously, the team that he selected was they did well to win their 2 games, and obviously, it shows. So obviously, he's not a coach that has no idea what he's doing. Obviously, he picked those players for a reason. I respect that decision. So it's honestly like as a fan, I could say it's how do I say it? Is it if you want some goals, just give me a call. As well. But yeah.
Anyway, I've got to ask you as well. Obviously, you're off contract at the end of the season. I'm sure Western would love to keep you, but what are your thoughts on that, and what are your plans?
It's something that me and my family have been discussing for the past couple of months. Me and my agent as well. I've been having a chat with the boss as well and get his intake, and then obviously get as much information and opinion from different people as possible to know what the right move is for myself. So it's something I'm not focusing on at the moment. Obviously, I'm here at Western. Playing as much as possible is what's going to help me to get interest. Obviously, it's up in the air, but all I'm focusing on is playing my football here at Western to help us hopefully win a trophy.
No, I'm pretty sure you're going to get a lot of phone calls for the rest of the year, not only from Tony Popovich, but probably some clubs in the A-League and overseas as well, mate. We'll look forward to watching what you do next, mate. All the best, and thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Tommy, I like him. I like him. I like the
matter of fact.
I don't know if it's somewhere between confidence and arrogance, but the sort of, if you want goals, give me a call.
Yeah.
Strikers have to have that, huh?
I think they do, and I think that that will hold him in good stead if he does end up going to Europe. Which, to be honest, reading between the lines of what he was saying there, I think that he's off. I mean, that's my personal opinion, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting as well his comments about the Socceroos. I think that. He doesn't want it to be too much of a distraction or a talking point. I think he's focusing on clubland, and that's great news for Western United.
If you're him, would you go? Knowing as well that he's had the experience of being in Europe before as a sort of junior. I think it was at Hoffenheim. He was in their academy and all that. Much better player now, though, than obviously back then. He's developed loads.
I think he should go. I think that if the right opportunity comes, I think that the timing's right. He's 23 now. He's at a pivotal kind of junction in his career. You never know what's around the corner in football, and injuries and these types of things. He's had a great season so far. I think if a good opportunity in Europe came knocking, he should take it with both hands.
Yep. Tommy, 5 games left in the season for most teams in the league. So we were given the enormous responsibility of playing around with a table predictor website, which was incredible fun. So we've got our projected top 6s for both of us. I should preface this whole discussion by saying this is the A-League, so who the hell knows?
It's very easy to look like a fool doing this.
Incredibly easy. We do it every week, believe it or not. But it's funny because if you sat here and you thought, well, I think this team's going to finish in the top 6 in this position, but you actually go through trying to predict the results in the games that are left, you might end up with 2 different sort of situations, and I certainly did. But let's start with your top 6, Tommy. Talk me through it.
So I had Auckland, with obviously 7 points ahead at the moment. I think that they're too far ahead, and I think that they'll maintain that lead and go on to win the title. I did have Melbourne City leapfrogging Western United. I think that Melbourne City's got a pretty good run home from here. And ultimately, I have Sydney FC just pipping Adelaide for 6th spot. And I think that, the Sydney FC Adelaide one was the one I kept playing with the most, and I think that the game this weekend is going to go a long way into proving me right or wrong, I think.
Yeah, and me right or wrong as well, to be honest. We'll talk more about that game specifically.
Yeah.
But mine is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
I think the only significant difference we have here is that I've got Adelaide ahead of Sydney, even though if you ask me independent of, as I say, picking the results in the games, I think Sydney FC will just squeak in, although my confidence levels in them are dropping.
That's right.
But that's what I've got, which is...
It's interesting because as well, if you look at, someone like the Wanderers, for example, their next 3 games are against Auckland, Melbourne City and Western United. So, Wanderers are obviously capable of beating any of those teams, and if depending on the result of those games, which is obviously a very tough one to pick, it can change the whole picture very quickly. So, one result, we obviously said it, but you can look like a fool pretty quickly.
Totally. I'm pretty sure I put in a draw for the Adelaide-Sydney game this weekend as
Did
well,
you?
which, I mean, look, any of the results, nothing would surprise me. That is such a line ball game.
That is.
The other thing I couldn't take my eye off on both of our ladders is the goal difference for Perth Glory at the bottom of the ladder, which is bad. We'll have time to talk about their awful season later on, but it looks like they're going to set a record for the worst goal difference in A-League history, which is crazy. So we've both got Auckland.
Yeah, quite
on
similar.
top.
Quite similar, actually.
Our producer Nick Stoll, I don't know if he was just a few beers deep when he did his predictor, but he had I think Western United beating Auckland to the title.
That's right.
I don't see that happening, but it's interesting when you look at their games. They don't have the easiest run home. So their last 5, Wanderers home, Sydney away, Victory away, Perth at home, and then Western United away last weekend of the season in Tarneit. So the only 3 points you can take to the bank there are Perth Glory.
Well, yeah, if history is to prove anything, then yes. But also 7 points, if they are to get 3 points in that game, for example, that's 10 points. Western almost have to win every game to overtake them. And are they going to do that? I'm not sure. Another interesting one to keep an eye out, we've obviously touched on them, but Adelaide has the bye in the last round.
Yes.
So they'll be watching Sydney FC potentially quite nervously.
Super frustrating weekend that will be. They've done all they can, and all they can do is sit back and watch the chaos of the A-League unfold.
Exactly.
Auckland did what they needed to on the weekend, though, didn't they, in Brisbane?
They did. It wasn't their best performance, but I think that's kind of been the story of them so far this season. Not necessarily playing their best football, but finding a way to win, and that's what championship teams do, and they did it again.
Yeah. So we talked about Auckland, Western United, their last 5, Perth at home, 3 in the bag. Wanderers away, Brisbane away, Sydney home, Auckland home. You'd like to think they're taking 3 if they're serious away from Brisbane.
That's right. And I think, Perth and Brisbane, they'll see as must-win games. You look at Wanderers, Sydney FC, Auckland, on any given day, that result could go either way. So these are the kind of things that there's so many of the top 6 teams playing each other, in these last 5 rounds, which is so exciting because the repercussions and the, permutations of these results will be huge for every team in the table, really.
And then Melbourne City, who we both got coming second, and then I guess taking that Champions League spot that Auckland can't qualify for. Mariners home, Brisbane home, Wanderers away, Adelaide home, Sydney at home. Just a quick word on them. Obviously, a good result for them at Sydney.
Yeah.
But I don't know, they seem to be finishing strong.
Yeah.
Marco Tilio on fire. Just
That's right.
in general, there's a lot to like there. Have they gone under the radar a little bit this season, and particularly, to get to this point where they could just float up, you know what I mean?
I think as well, because if you look at Melbourne City in seasons gone by, we've associated them with, free-flowing, attacking football, scoring goals. They haven't found goal scoring as easy this season as they have in previous seasons, but they've got the equal best defensive record with Auckland. They've only conceded 20 goals this season, and that's gone a long way to them, being in the position they are now, because how many games or how many times this season have they just narrowly won a game, 1-0? They score a goal, it's enough for them to win them a game. And if you compare that with someone like Adelaide, it feels like to win a game, they have to score 5 goals. So I think that's been the key to their success so far this season.
We'll get on to Adelaide properly in a bit. Obviously got to dissect the fallout of the original rivalry match on the weekend, another belter. Melbourne Victory, man, they've had an up and down season like almost every team in the league bar Auckland, really, to be honest. But their ups are so good. At the heart of their performance on the weekend was Daniel Arzani and Nishan Velupillay, fresh from the Socceroos. Obviously both pretty high on confidence.
Yep.
Arzani's had dips throughout the season.
Yep.
But this was a return for me to the Arzani we know and love.
Absolutely, and I think that when Melbourne Victory is at their best, they're capable of beating anyone, and no one in finals will want to play them. But the question for them so far this season is which Melbourne Victory are you going to get? And I think defensively in particular, there's been games where they've looked very vulnerable. But you just said it: if these 2 players, Arzani and Velupillay, go into the finals in the kind of form that they showed on the weekend, and for the few weeks leading into this weekend as well, they've been in good form for the last few games. I think that Melbourne Victory is definitely a force to be reckoned with.
Do you like seeing Arzani with the confidence to go up in Isaiah's grill as well and just chat like that?
Yeah.
Obviously the guys, we're all riding him, I guess, for a big chunk of the season. We're all flummoxed when Popper gave him the call up.
Yeah.
Clearly it's done wonders for him though, because his confidence levels are back high.
It has, and I think it's interesting because we saw, it was only, 3-4 months ago when Popper kind of came out and made some pretty harsh comments about him, and that was at a time when he was playing quite well, and now it seems at a time when he was lacking confidence, and Popper kind of put his arm around his shoulder, at least publicly, and it's interesting to see that kind of relationship, but it seemed to have worked, as you just said, and it's a great time for Melbourne Victory.
If they turn up like that with him on fire and the next bloke we're going to talk about can beat anyone in the league on any given day, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
On Nish, what a player he's reminding us that he is. Before we talk about him more, let's hear a little bit now from Archie Thompson, who spoke on the A-League Download about the form that he's in.
And I think with Nishan Velupillay, we all know his talent. I think he started to maybe think, wow, I've got something about me because I'm making a Socceroo team. And then, all of a sudden, he's playing fantastic. And I think he's actually now starting to believe in his own ability. And he's scoring goals. He's scoring goals for the national team. He's scoring goals for Melbourne Victory. I don't think we'll see him on Australian shores for too much longer because he just gives so much going forward. But he's actually believing in himself. And you can see it out on the football pitch. I mean, some of the runs that he makes, he's silky on the ball, and he's starting to score goals. That's, I think, one thing that I was always sort of questioning about him. But now he's putting goals to it. He's really an excitement machine.
He believes in him, and you believe in him.
We all believe in him.
We all
believe in you, baby. We believe in you.
We believe in you too, Archie. But confidence there, Tommy. That's the big thing, especially for attacking players, dribblers, guys who take players on. Nishan's got that. He's had it all season, I guess. The only, I suppose, time that we could say he didn't have it was when he was injured, and I guess the period after that where he just struggled to recapture.
And it was in a team that was struggling as well, I think, at that time when he did come back. But, it's never easy in that situation. But ultimately, I think, he's just picked up where he left off before he got injured. And, the thing that separates him from other talented players in the league, I think, is that he's been clinical. Every kind of chance he seems to get, or every time he, makes a good run or a good dribble, he makes the right decision with the ball at the right time, or he's clinical with his finishing, and Archie just touched on it. That's the biggest difference between him and other players in the league, I think, so far. And
I think as well about the goal he scored against Indonesia. And look, an easy goal, so to speak, but in a situation like that, when you've got so much time to think about what you're going to do, to make the correct decision is a sign of a player who's maturing.
That's right.
So where do you think he can go? 23, 24 years of age, I think he's not a young player anymore, right? And as Archie said on that clip, hopefully, not for our sake, we want to keep watching him every week, but hopefully for his sake and the Socceroo's sake, he's out of here soon and taking the next step in his career. But where can that next step be, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think he's got 12 months left on his contract, so he's got another season after this one, and I think Melbourne Victory will be probably looking to earn some money off him going into the off-season this year, and I think the timing could potentially be right for that. In terms of his ceiling, I think that he's very capable of playing in most competitions in Europe, so I think that I would love to personally see him play in Europe, maybe one of the top Asian leagues as well, somewhere like Japan as well. I think that would be a good stepping stone for him. But the thing that I really like about him is that he's not a luxury player, and I think that's why a lot of foreign coaches will like him as well. He's not a player that's going to shy away from doing the hard yards.
He works hard.
He works hard for his team, and he's a very unselfish player too. He makes a lot of forward runs without the ball to create space for his teammates and things like that. These are things that coaches will love everywhere in the world. So, wherever he decides to go, if he does move on from Melbourne Victory, I think that he's every chance of being a success.
Totally. Let's hear a quick word from him now after the game on the weekend, talking about Melbourne Victory's fighting spirit.
It was a roller coaster. I think 5-3 scoreline says it all. But it's good to get the win. I think we've kind of let it slip away in these moments at the end of the game and in the last couple of weeks, and it shows that we do have that fight and that character. And it's just it's good to get the win.
A final series suits them, don't you think, Tommy? On a day, like any team at the moment, you question their consistency and will this player fire on this day or whatever, but when it all comes together, they're bloody good.
That's right. It reminds me of, remember, I think Kevin Muscat was the manager and they came fourth and they ended up winning in the grand final.
I remember. I was there that day in Newcastle.
It has a little bit of the same aura. They're a team that's inconsistent, but on their day, they'll beat anyone. And I think that, with that much attacking ability in the lineup, no one wants to play them.
Bodes well for an exciting final series. Do most teams want to play Adelaide at the moment?
I think so.
Especially after what we heard from, I guess we'll call it our sister or our cousin show, A-League Off Air. Robbie Thompson dropping the news that Carl Viet might be on the way out, that their technical director, Ernest Faber, has had a meeting with him and told him basically that you're no guarantee to be here next season because of the drop-off in results and performances, I guess you could say as well. They've only won one of their last 8, conceded 45 goals in 21 matches. Only Perth have conceded more during that time. It's a disaster at the moment, Tommy. I mean, you consider not long ago we were talking about can they overtake Auckland on the ladder.
Exactly. I think, you just touched on it defensively. I think that's been the key to their downfall in recent months because, beforehand, even though I don't think they were ever really convincing defensively, but they managed to kind of keep it together enough and score enough goals in games to get results. But, the defensive performances in recent weeks has been diabolical, to be honest. And I think the concerning thing from Adelaide's perspective is, week in, week out, they haven't been able to rectify these problems. They've just been kind of, rolling out the same starting lineup, playing the same kind of football, and the same mistakes are happening each week. And I think that's been the most concerning thing. And obviously this weekend coming up against Sydney FC, a team that is, has a lot of attacking talent too. I think that if Adelaide can't find a way to kind of shut up shop defensively, it could be a tough game for them as well.
Well, on that, let's hear from Carl Viet now talking about those defensive issues.
Tonight, if we'd got something, that gives us then the confidence to push on, and we have to, next week, we've got another tough game at home to Sydney, and we'll just have to find a way to win. And we maybe, the coaching staff, myself and the coaching staff, have to change the way we defend because it's obviously not working. Yes, we want to be proactive and play football, but we have to find a way to win.
Tommy, is it harsh for them to be looking at their coaching options?
I don't know, because on one hand, you look at the job that Carl Viet's done in terms of bringing some really talented young players through, the likes of Kikianis this season, Jovanovic as well. There's many players. I think that he's done a really good job. But on the other hand, I think that we just touched on it before. The frustrating thing is that they're not learning from their mistakes defensively. And I think that, in his press conference just then, he was talking. The narrative is very much around kind of effort and picking yourselves up and confidence. But I think that if you look a little bit deeper than that at the tactics they're employing in the games, the likes of Piraeus and Kiddo playing fullback, they're two very attacking-minded players. I just do think that they're leaving themselves a little bit vulnerable defensively in the way they set up. And they've been doing that kind of week in, week out. I think that if they are going to get into the 6 and then have a real crack at the finals, they need to change something defensively, and whether that be in terms of formation or system or personnel, they need to look at their options, I think.
Yeah, well, there is still time, and their last 5 is probably one of the easier runs you can have for the teams that were left in this sort of finals mix. Sydney at home, Perth at home, Wellington at home, Brisbane away, Melbourne City away, and then the bye, as you mentioned, in the last week.
Yeah.
I mean, that run in the middle there, Perth home, Wellington home, Brisbane away, if they win those 3 games, which they probably should, I haven't done the maths off the top of my head. We've obviously done the predictor, but that should keep them in the mix.
Well, I think that, when I did my predictor, I obviously had them falling out of the 6. I think that if you look at their last 8 games, all of those teams are probably in better form than Adelaide. So I think that, things can change quickly in football, and the team that we saw before the new year, kind of in Adelaide, isn't the team that we're seeing now, and I think it can be really difficult to kind of claw that form back, and they're going to have to do it quickly.
What about this game against Sydney?
I tipped Sydney, and I think that, I don't think Adelaide or Sydney are going to fly over the line in terms of these last 5 games and be in red-hot form come finals time. I think it's going to be who can lose the least amount of games, and basically that'll be the team that clinches the 6th spot, but I think Sydney will win this one.
Yeah, we've got to have a real talk about Sydney here, because we've both been pretty hot on them this season, the way Ufuk Talay has got them playing in terms of the style. I think we both agree that it's aspirational, that we'd like to see that, but the inconsistency, the gap between their best and worst football
It's huge.
is too big.
It is.
And in pre-season, I showed you earlier, Tommy, I wrote a story just before the season started, after the Douglas Costa signing, looking at their squad, and the headline was something like, why Sydney FC are unbackable favourites to win the A-League. Everybody thought that. There was no universe in which we thought they would not be in the top 6.
Yeah.
And yet, according to my bloody predictor, and I think they should be in there, they're not in there.
Well, and this is a team with Joe Lolly and Douglas Costa, who are arguably, the 2 best players in the competition. So for them to not make the 6, in terms of, reality and what everyone expected, and comparing the 2, they're 2 wildly different things. And I think that, Ufuk Talay has put himself under a lot of pressure, and I completely agree with you, and we've spoken about it many times this season. I do love the way he tries to go about the game and the kind of positive approach that he has and wants to dictate. But in terms of the performances that we're seeing, we're not seeing that translate into the performances consistently enough. And, I think that as well, he does have a lot to answer for, both in terms of recruitment. I think they signed too many attackers in the off-season. I think they were one defender short. Obviously now in Popovic and Alex Grant, they're two good defenders in terms of the centre-half pairing, but we're only seeing them play together for the first time right at the end of the season, which is almost too late. So, I think that he definitely has a lot to answer for. And, I mean, one thing I do have to bring up as well, I think, is his decision to leave Andrew Redmayne out. Because if Andrew Redmayne had played all the games this season, I think they would already be in the finals position. I think that's cost them significant amount of points. And obviously there's something going on in the background there in terms of contracts. I'm not sure what the situation is, but ultimately leaving him out has cost them results. And I think that there's a lot to answer for there.
Yeah, I find that one a puzzling decision. The other one, just forward of goalkeeper and defence actually, which are two problem areas, is it's interesting they've not figured out what their best midfield mix is all season long. And they brought in Leo Senna and Anas Wahim. Both are in and out of the team, and, they're bringing in kids who look all right as well. But I think back to the fact that they let Luke Bratton go.
Yeah, that's right.
And I just think Luke Bratton would look pretty good at the number 6 in this team and might help solve some of those problems.
And you look at one of their main issues has been getting their best players the ball in good positions. And Anthony Caceres is a player that can do that. But Anthony Caceres is playing a different role every week. He's almost being used as a utility to fill gaps where they've had problems, and he's good enough to do that. But if you want him at his best, you need a player like Luke Bratton to take the pressure off him. I think it's all been too predictable, because if Caceres doesn't get the ball off the defenders and give it to these players, I don't think any of the other players can.
Yeah. Let's hear a little bit now from Uffy speaking after the game on the weekend.
Very impressive performance from your team today. How do you assess it?
Yeah, I definitely don't agree with that. I think we started off the game very sluggish. We allowed them to score an early goal. We got ourselves back in the game twice, and then tried to push, obviously, with our games at home. But, we allowed them too many times easy opportunities within our box. I don't think the desperation and desire was there to protect our goal this evening, and I think it was very inconsistent in moments with the ball.
Tommy, we've spoken before about the parallels between him and Ange Postecoglou, I think. I can't get away from them at the moment when you think that Tottenham Hotspur fans want Ange sacked, even if they happen to win the Europa League, the second-tier league in that continent. Some Sydney FC fans want Ufuk Talay sacked, even if they win the ACL2, which is the Europa League equivalent in Asia. Uffy hasn't had to deal with the injury crisis that Ange has had to deal with at Spurs. But they're both trying to approach football the same way, and at their best you can see in both teams how good it can be.
Yeah.
But they're let down in critical moments, I think, by both coaches, both teams, by individual mistakes.
Yep.
And you can say that, but at some point, those individual mistakes come down on the coach, right?
That's right. And I think that, going forward, I think ultimately in terms of the ACL2 and how it's perceived in Australia, rightly or wrongly, I think Ufuk Talay will be mostly judged off what happens in the A-League. And I think that if they don't make the 6, and they don't win the ACL2, I think his job is on the line. And I think if they do win the ACL2, there might be a little bit of forgiveness, but ultimately I think that them not making the 6, that's disastrous for a club like Sydney FC.
You're seeing Sydney FC fans as well already mention the name Graham Arnold, a free agent, probably looking for his next opportunity soon. I don't know if it's a wise decision for any club in any circumstance to go back, a bit like what Spurs fans want to do with Pochettino at the moment, to be honest. But he's there in the background, and in my head, I think Arnie would be getting a stronger tune out of this squad right now.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Arnie's one of the most successful coaches, after Ange in A-League history, and I think that, he's a fantastic coach and deserves a lot of respect. But I think the surprising thing with Ufuk Talay is we saw what he did with Wellington and how he managed to make them play really free-flowing attacking football. Now at Sydney FC, he's got better players and it hasn't really looked as convincing as it did at Wellington. So for Sydney FC fans, I can understand their frustration. However, still a lot to play for, and they have so much quality that, things can change very quickly in football, as we've seen with the other teams, and I think that, it's too early to rule them out.
In this competition as well, they can change very quickly. Just quickly, their run home, Adelaide away, Lion City Sailors in Singapore, Auckland at home, Lion City at home, Newcastle at home, Western United away, Melbourne City away.
Tough.
Yeah, especially with the travel involved as well. I mean, that can go one of two ways, can't it? It's to Singapore. It's not to, further afield, so it's not that bad.
I think looking at those games, though, I think it does really heighten and show how important the game is against Adelaide this weekend, because, looking at those fixtures, that's almost going off form, the most winnable one and the one with the most direct kind of repercussions for them. So this weekend, I think we'll have a clearer idea of if Sydney FC is going to, have a chance to make the top 6.
I also think if they happen to win this one and then win in Singapore, that almost sets them up a little bit in terms of positivity as well, and then that travel factor actually flips in their favour. If they've got more games and they're in good form and they're getting results, that can sort of self-perpetuate a little bit.
Yep.
So we'll see. Really, really
make or break
situation.
Week for them.
Absolutely. Newcastle, Tommy, a decision has reportedly been made there, according to the Newcastle Herald. They're saying Rob Stanton has been told he will be terminated at the end of the season. Right. So a new coach will come in. It's harsh for me a little bit. Obviously, something has gone on in the background here in terms of potential disagreements about resources or something. I'm not sure. Overall, I think he's been okay. Do you think he's done a good job?
I mean, if this happened at the end of last season, I wouldn't have been completely surprised. I thought that, but I think the timing is the perplexing thing, because I think this is a team that's very much on the up. If you look at their form since kind of Christmas, since, the likes of Lockie Rose, Eli Adams, these players are starting to play really good football. They're winning games, scoring goals. No, I think the timing is the most perplexing thing around this. So it'll be interesting to see if how that unfolds and who they get in to replace him if that is true.
I don't think they're choosing to move on from him sort of willy-nilly without a plan. I mean, the rumour, and it remains a rumour, is that Mark Milligan is going to be the guy to come in and take them forward, which for me is an exciting prospect, given... I think I've spoken a few times. In fact, we even had him on the show. I think he's a good head coach in waiting. We won't know until he's in the chair and experiences it himself. I mean, you've played with him, Tommy.
Yeah.
How good is his football mind?
No, he's a natural leader, and I think that the one thing that kind of gives you insight into how well he reads the game of football is that the amount of positions he played. You could play him centre-back, midfield, full-back. You could play him anywhere on the field, and he had a really deep understanding of what was required in that role. So this is a person with deep football intellect, and if you having played with him, I just said it, he's a natural leader, and I think that he's got all the makings to be a great coach. So if that does come to fruition, I think that's exciting for Newcastle.
I wouldn't be surprised as well if Rob Stanton ends up somewhere else in the league as well. I mean, Perth and Brisbane will dissect their seasons a little bit deeper in future shows, but they could certainly do worse with him. And even Adelaide, if it's true about Viet, there's maybe 3 clubs that will be looking for new coaches.
Absolutely, and I think that if you look at the budget and the circumstances he had to work with at Newcastle, I think that he's done a pretty good job, and for sure he's an A-League level coach, and I think that other opportunities will come knocking.
Are we A-League level coaches though, Tommy? We've more fun and games here.
I'm certainly not. You might be.
I'm not feeling confident in my ability, to be honest. We've been asked to put together a Trans-Tasman 11. So current players in the A-League from Australia and New Zealand only.
Yep.
I found this a more difficult exercise than what I thought it would be, Tom.
Yeah, I did too, actually. And I think that, if I look at mine now, just reminding myself of it.
Well, before you do that, look at mine. Thoughts? The biggest sort of question marks I had, and no disrespect to Gabriel Kalur, but I found finding a right back who's been really strong and consistent in the league this season a challenge. He's had some really good moments. I've gone with, I think this is the sort of, Popper-esque? No, not quite. Who plays with this formation? I think Sydney FC play with this sort of formation.
Yeah, they do. They do.
With the 2 holders and the midfield, the wingers who can sort of drift in or whatever.
Yeah. That's true. Segacic in the combined starting 11, but on the bench for Sydney FC.
Interesting, isn't it? But I like the balance of this team. I thought the Alex Grant. Look, I didn't have him in my theoretical Socceroo squad.
I think what's interesting is if you look at this back 4, and De Vries is the only player I have the same as your 4 defenders. I think this is, these are players that maybe in other seasons wouldn't have got a look in this team. I think that there's, if you look in historically, going back some years, the likes of Alex Wilkinson, Spiranovic, these were players that were starting for the Socceroos, 100% starters for the Socceroos, and they were playing in the A-League. And I think that now, defensively, we don't really have players kicking on at that level. So I think that defensively was where I found this the hardest, I should say. I did have Mitch Langerack in goals too, instead of Poulsen. Poulsen's obviously done more in the A-League. But, Langerack, I think his quality speaks for itself. I put Kai Truan and Pineacre at centre-back.
I picked Alex Grant more on reputation than form, which is probably, I've tried to pick it mostly on form, but if I thought his little form in the A-League was enough to get him in the Socceroos, he's getting into mine.
Yeah.
And I prefer, sorry to your front line, but I like my big man, little man combination up front of Botic and Barbarouses.
Yeah, I don't know. Barbarouses, I think that this was 2 years ago, 100% agree. But I think that Costa Barbarouses isn't the player now that he was a few years ago.
Yeah, but I just felt like I had to pick more Kiwi.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I think that for me, the four defenders are from Melbourne City and Auckland, who have been the two strongest teams in terms of defence. So that was where my mind was at. Teague and Caceres.
Consensus on the midfield at least.
Agreed. And front four, I mean, you could go anyway, but I chose Leckie, Tilio, Milanovic and Botic. And I think that Leckie and Tilio have obviously been injured, so we haven't seen the best of them this season, but we all know how good they are.
I was tossing up between Segicic and Milanovic as well.
Yeah.
Both sort of line ball for me. But
yeah, interesting.
Maybe Sydney FC should be starting Segicic.
Let us know what you think.
Yeah. or don't. If you have bad things to say, keep it yourself. No, all good. Let's have a look at what they're talking about on Dub Zone this week. Melbourne City are on the brink of some history.
Coming up on Dub Zone, Victory takes the Pride Cup and seals a top 2 spot with a win over the Reds. Canberra tames the Wild West to control its finals destiny. And the Sky Blues keep believing as records tumble in the Sydney Derby. Teo and Teresa will join me again. What caught your attention this week?
I found it fun to watch the personalities on show around the league. It was fun to watch some pests at it, getting people fired up.
We had one of the best young talents in the country on show at the Sydney Derby, and Indiana Dos Santos was pretty good too.
Passion, precision and plenty more. That's all ahead on another Dub Zone. Catch us on the A-Leagues website, app, YouTube channel or on 10 Play.
All right, Tommy, into extra time, mate. We'll start with, if you could pick one current A-League player to build your team around for the next 5 years, who would it be and why?
I think you kind of have to rule out anyone that's, late 20s or in their 30s just because of 5 years, though. Like, that's a long time.
Yeah, but I don't know. Are we assuming they're going to be as good as they are now?
Well, I think that if you pick someone younger, they're more likely to stay, at the top of their game for longer. So, anyway, that's where my mind went. I had Teague or Tilio, both 23, both, I think that Teague, obviously, very mature player. Tilio is a player. There's not many players like him in the league. Very exciting. I think they're players that both teams would not want to lose.
A good shout. I would say Teague, but I'm going to say Noah Botic, only because, and look, that's based on the assumption that this season is going to be the way he plays going forward, but it's hard to find good strikers in the A-League at the moment.
Yep.
I think that's been shown.
Fair enough.
So there you go.
Yep.
Is Eli Adams the most graceful player to watch in the A-League? And before you answer this, can you please define grace for me?
Well, I think grace personified, without going into the definition, the first name I think of is Thierry Henry. I think that he's the kind of player, it's that effortlessness with the ball. It just looks so natural, and he's definitely a player that's like that. A player who, obviously, he has a long way to go to be this level, but a player he does remind me of, just the way he carries himself, is Robbie Cruz, actually, a little bit. And I've loved watching him play so far this season, and looking forward to hopefully him kicking on for the rest of the season.
Another Queenslander as well, Tommy.
That's right, they're everywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Not many at the Raw, though.
No, funnily enough.
Ironically.
But, they're producing so many up in Queensland that they're getting squeezed out into the NPL system and then eventually floating up at other A-League clubs, which is good. Tommy, which Socceroos would you like to see in the A-League next season? And be realistic.
Yeah, I mean, one that I would love to see is Martin Boyle. I think he's
been saying it too. He wants to come here.
Exactly, and if I'm a Perth Glory or a team like that, I'll get him in. I think that he's been fantastic for the Socceroos. He's an exciting player to watch. He's a player that would draw crowds. I think to come and watch him play. I think he'd be a great fit.
I reckon we'll see him the season after the World Cup.
Yeah.
Mine's Masluongo.
Yeah.
Plug him into that Sydney FC midfield might solve some problems.
That's true.
Tommy, Marco Rojas is leaving Wellington Phoenix.
Yep.
Possibly the last we'll see of him in the A-League.
Yep.
If so, what's his legacy in this competition?
Oh, what a player. I mean, obviously he's come and gone from the A-League a few times, but, when I think of Marco Rojas, I think of him at Melbourne Victory, running up and down the wing, unstoppable on his day. Very exciting player, and I think what a career he's had so far. It'll be interesting to see what happens to now.
Speaking of Wellington, Chico Giraldes delivered one of the great press conferences there.
Yeah.
But was it the best? What is your all-time best A-League press conference?
This was a great one. It was super refreshing, but my favourite one, I'm sorry to say it, but is Aurelio Vidmar's one. It still cracks me up. Sorry, Viddy, but it is a funny one.
Yeah, I was still an Adelaide United fan full-time back then. That one, painful memory. My vote goes to Miron Bleiberg, the lizard system.
Yep.
If you weren't around, please Google those words and enjoy. I don't think there's video of it, just text, but that's enough when it comes to Miron, to be honest.
Yeah.
Tommy, good to have you back, mate. Good innings.
Thanks. Great to be back. It was fun.
Big weekend. We'll see you next week.